All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I'm Thomas and I do educational videos. Today is the 68th video that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory, which is a theory of everything derived by Dewey Larson up until the time he died in 1990. And it has been brought forward by Dr. Bruce Perrett, Dr. K.V.K. Nehru, Dr. Gopi Krishna, and many others, not many, but a few others in the years since then. The core of the theory came out in Larson's first two postulates that he proposed in the 50s, and the basic idea is that the universe is not made out of matter, and the universe is not made out of energy, but the universe is made out of motion. Matter and energy are actually both forms of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. That is reflected in a ratio or a fraction. You have time over space relationships, that's energy, and you have space over time relationships, that's speed. Space over time, 60 miles per hour. And space and time are reciprocals of each other, meaning that they both have the same fundamental characteristics, but they are inverses of one another, like 3 1/3 or 4 1/4. And they both have discrete units, meaning that there is a minimum unit of space and there is a minimum unit of time. And 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. Where Einstein says that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe, Larson says that the speed of light is the neutral point or the midpoint of the universe. And there is a half of the universe that moves slower than the speed of light. That's the universe that we're familiar with, that Einstein was familiar with. He calls that the material sector. And that is also, he calls it Sector 1. Sector 1 is the world of chemistry, atoms and molecules. But then there is also half of the universe that's moving faster than the speed of light. And this half we're not familiar with, but Larson calls it Sector 2, or the cosmic universe. And even though we're not familiar with it, because we are familiar with Sector 1, all we have to do is extrapolate, because what goes on in Sector 1 is the inverse of what's going on in Sector 2, because they are reciprocals of each other by the reciprocal relationship between space and time. And so all you have to do when you cross over the boundary of the speed of light between the Sector 1 and Sector 2 is invert the roles of space and time. And so space and time are both identical to each other in their qualities. Space, we know, is a three-dimensional thing, XYZ coordinates. I would also say four-dimensional, using tetrahedral coordinates works as well. But the thing that we know then about space being three-dimensional or four-dimensional is also true of time. It's space over here in the Sector 1 is three-dimensional. Time over here is in the cosmic sector, or Sector 2, is 3 or 4-dimensional. And Larson calls that coordinate time, just like coordinate space. But then also we know that time is always progressing. It's flowing. It's always getting later and later and later. And this is a material sector thing that we recognize as the flow of time. That's a scalar flow of time, meaning that it's moving always later and later and later, but it's not got any direction any vectorial direction to it in the same way that coordinate space or time does. It's just the analogy is a balloon, and taking a magic marker and putting a bunch of dots on the balloon. You blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other, but in no specific direction, or in all directions, really. And so time over here has the coordinate three-dimensional time, and then also space is flowing or progressing in a scalar manner in the same way that time is doing over here. And Larson, identifies that as the recession of the distant galaxies that was first observed by the Hubble telescope back in the 1920s. All of the galaxies are moving away from each other. The further away they are, the faster they're moving apart. Okay, now sector 1 grows by aggregation, by particles coming together and sticking together, up until its most complex level, which Larson refers to as DNA. The DNA molecule is the most complex molecule, and it is the prerequisite or the minimum that is needed for the material sector body to become eligible to come under the control of a sector 2 unit. That has to do with what's called the interregional ratio. We talked about it earlier. We will talk about it later, but it's a unnecessary complexity here. So when the material sector comes under the control of a cosmic sector unit, Larson refers to that as the life unit. So the life unit is a DNA molecule that comes under the control of a sector 2 unit. And then this life unit develops up into its most complex level, and which Larson says is the intelligent human being or the intelligent humanoid. And at that point, it becomes eligible to be under the overall control of what Larson calls the metaphysical unit or the sector 3 unit, which is entirely independent of space and time, really maybe the origin of space and time, and maybe this boundary that has to do with the light. Whereas the sector 2 unit is geared toward survival, the sector 3 unit is geared toward ethical behavior or good behavior. The ancient mythologies would have called this God or the spirit world, or something to that effect. Larson calls it sector 3. Sector 3 communicates with us through transmissions that are variously called ESP, intuition, scientific insight, religious revelation. He also, they are the same kind of transmission, but they really have to do, the differences have to do with kind of the preparedness of the life unit, of the human, and maybe the context that the life unit is their mindset. Whether something is scientific insight or whether it is religious revelation. Intuition is more of a generalized level. You don't have to have really any specialized knowledge to get intuition, but to get scientific insight, you need to do a lot of studying, a lot of preparing to be able to decode the messages. The messages that we receive from sector 3 are always correct, but our ability to translate them correctly is subject to our own limitations. Okay, now We are looking at chapter 17. We just got started with chapter 17 of this book, Beyond Space and Time, Larson's last book, where he delves into metaphysical stuff. So most of his early books are on, the hard sciences, but then his final book that came out after he died is Beyond Space and Time. That's on metaphysical stuff and philosophy, psychology, and religion. And we're on this chapter that's called Free Will. So we're going to take over here at, I think this is like the third paragraph of the chapter. The constancy of direction does not apply to the activities of the human race. Man is subject not only to control by a Sector 2 entity, the life unit, but also by a Sector 3 control unit. In many areas, the two controls operate harmoniously. An adequate food supply, for instance, is just as essential to the attainment of Sector 3 objectives as it is to the attainment of Sector 2 objectives, and hence no conflict arises in this area. But in a great many other cases, the action that is taken if the Sector 2 control prevails is quite different from that which is taken if the Sector 3 control gains ascendancy. Here, man must make the kind of a decision that does not confront any other living organism. He must decide which of two conflicting sets of governing rules he will follow. Or he must work out some kind of a compromise between the two. There are also decisions to be made as to the particular actions which will contribute most effectively to the attainment of the objectives that are decided upon. And in this respect, man is in the same position as any other animal, but only man is called upon to decide which set of rules he will follow. Whenever there is a decision of this kind to be made, the choice between behavior as an animal and behavior as an ethical human being is one which the individual exercises by virtue of his free will. At both extremes of philosophical thought, there are those who deny the existence of free will and contend that the human actions are predetermined. There is an issue of crucial importance in many areas of This is an issue of crucial importance in many areas of human activity. Probably no other issue in philosophy is more alive today or has more far-reaching consequences. If all events in the world, including a man's thoughts and actions, are rigidly determined by forces beyond his control, then a man can neither act differently from the way he does, nor really guide the course of events, even in his own life. If he could not have acted differently, should he be held responsible for his own conduct? It is significant that both of the groups that deny the existence of free will base their demands on development of the consequences of their own doctrines, not on interpretation of the evidence. Those who believe that the entire course of events in the universe is foreordained argue from the premise that God is omnipotent, and hence everything that happens must be just as he wants it. Otherwise, he would change it. Quite aside from the fact that the available evidence is against it, this argument is not very convincing. Even if one were to grant the validity of the major premise, the conclusion does not necessarily follow. The strict mechanists likewise deny the existence of free will because it conflicts with their doctrines. If the universe is, in its entirety, is nothing but a mechanism, then every part of it, including the biological mechanism known as man, will respond to stimuli in a mechanistic manner. The response of any particular mechanism to any particular stimulus will be a specific action determined by the characteristics of the stimulus and the characteristics of the organism, with no opportunity for variation. In its simplest form, this is the doctrine of determinism. It originated from a consideration of the implications of the classical mechanics of Newton's era, which indicated that the state of a physical system at any particular time is uniquely determined by its state at any previous time. Laplace, who was the first to put this hypothesis into specific and unequivocal terms, contended that if there existed a being capable of knowing the exact condition of each constituent of the system at any one time, he could determine the exact conditions that will exist at any future time, as well as those that did exist at any specified past time. Now, he is saying that back in the 18th century, Laplacian determinism appeared to be well-grounded, but the uneasiness with most scientists felt about the denial of free will was clearly demonstrated by the alacrity with which they accepted the idea of that the statistical nature of the quantum theories provides a loophole through which free will can be reinstated. So because of quantum mechanics being a theory of probability, that indeterminacy or that probability allowed free will to sneak back in there. Eddington was one of the first and most articulate of the advocates of this proposition. Before the ink was hardly dry on Heisenberg's announcement of his indeterminacy principle, Eddington was proclaiming that science, quote, science thereby withdraws its moral opposition to free will. But then Eddington's buoyant optimism was short-lived, as powerful voices were soon heard pointing out that replacing determinism by chance accomplishes nothing toward clearing the way for the exercise of that choice, which is the essence of the free will concept. So now he goes through kind of a literature review of different authorities and what their points of view are on this. He cites Henry Margenau, Erwin Schrödinger, A.R.B. Lindsay, Hospers, J.H. Hospers, and here we go, back to Larson. The simple notion of causality is the one implied in the statement that from nothing, nothing comes. According to this viewpoint, there must be something or some combination of things, a cause or a number of causes that can be regarded as responsible for any specific physical event. If we then go a step further and assert that the correlation between the cause and the result is unique, so that a full knowledge of the cause would enable a prediction of the result in full detail, we have what will here be called determinism. Considerable difficulty has heretofore been experienced in arriving at a satisfactory definition of the term cause. Most of the definitions that have been proposed reduce to nothing more than a matter of time sequence when they are carefully analyzed. Many observers are therefore inclined to regard cause as a meaningless expression. Others have attempted to add further requirements to that of sequence in time in order to give this term the meaning that seems to be lacking. Okay. During the era when Newton's system, the so-called classical physics, was the unchallenged basis of physical science, the universe was regarded as being made up of physical objects, particles of matter, and combinations of such particles. And physical events were identified as changes in the motions and associations of these particles and their combinations. If such a system is isolated, not subject to outside influences, and is governed by definite laws and principles, causality becomes determinism, and we have the invariable sequence envisioned by Percival Bridgman. Not only is each event the result of certain causes, but the nature of the event is completely determined by those causes. Determinism was apparently an inescapable consequence of the classical viewpoint. No serious doubt was entertained that this determination covered all inorganic phenomena. How far it applied to living or conscious matter or to consciousness itself was a matter of individual opinion, but there was naturally a reluctance to accept any restriction of an outlook which had proved so successful over a wide domain. A discovery of phenomena to which the laws of classical physics are not applicable, and the rise of quantum mechanics as the new orthodox scientific doctrine destroyed the foundations upon which the deterministic theories were erected. Even causality was endangered, as it was found that many of the events taking place at the atomic level, such as the disintegration of a radioactive atom, for example, could not be correlated with any cause. An atom of uranium remains quiescent for years, and then suddenly, for no apparent reason, disintegrates. It is possible to predict quite accurately by statistical methods just how many atoms of a particular aggregate will undergo decay in a given period of time, but present-day physics is unable to tell us why. Okay, we're out of time, so we will get back to this tomorrow, continue with our free will, and have a great day. We'll see you soon.